Hey, it's Jordan. Delighted to be joined by Krystal Ball, now with Breaking Points, which will be debuting, I believe, next week
That's
on
right.
YouTube and many other places. We got a lot of politics to talk, but let's just start with the move to Breaking Points, leaving the Hill. I look at it on one end, I was kind of jealous of you because, I mean, you guys lapped everybody over the last 2 years at the Hill with you and Sagar doing great work. But I kind of thought to myself in the back of my mind, is the Hill going to realize what they're doing at some point? Obviously, whatever you want to share. But when did you guys start thinking it was time to go actually independent? And what were the core reasons?
We've been thinking about it for a while. And certainly we've been specifically plotting our exit for a couple of months now. But I mean, the core reason is exactly what you would suspect. There was a tension between the type of content that we were doing and, doing that content under a corporate brand. Sometimes that tension was very explicit in terms of direct uh, upset from our higher ups about, different segments that we were doing. And sometimes it was an appearance that I really didn't like. So, The Hill, their normal corporate media brand. And I want to say, this isn't about trashing them. I had so much more latitude to do what I wanted to do at The Hill than I ever did at MSNBC. They gave us a very long leash in terms of the type of content that we could do. But, they take money from Coke Industries. They take money from pharma. They take money from API. And so I hated even the appearance that might be impacting our coverage and the type of stories that we're doing. And look, I mean, anytime you operate within a sort of corporate media ecosystem, there's a series of pressures and incentives that are ambient around you that you'd be incredibly arrogant to think that you're not being impacted by. So when we've seen this year the number of people who've been able to go independent, it really just gave us the courage to stay true to our values and jump out on our own and take a little bit of a leap of faith. And so far, the response from the audience has been just, it's blown me away. It's really knocked my socks off. So yeah, we're excited.
And it's interesting to me because if you are a corporation like the Hill is, I mean, I would assume you guys were making them a lot of money. You went over 1 million subscribers. I mean, a lot of your videos were getting hundreds of thousands of views after a while. So you would think, the joke was always like if Rupert Murdoch thought becoming a, communist hippie channel would make him richer,
Right.
he would have made Fox that. So it's just kind of interesting that even with the success, there were still those limitations, which shows you how powerful the advertisers are, how powerful the corporate influence is, despite you guys making the Hill a good chunk of change.
Well, and there were also there was a lot of weird legacy thinking. And I'll give you two very specific examples. So, in addition to Rising, I also have a podcast with Kyle Kalinske called Krystal, Kyle, and Friends. And
I look forward to when you'll have me. Go ahead.
Yes, we would love that. And, the way that things work online, just like you're having me on now, which is good for me and hopefully good for you. And it's this sort of symbiotic relationship where we all build each other. It's not a zero-sum game, in other words. There was all this legacy thinking of control. And I was banned from even mentioning that I was doing this podcast on the channel that I built. Kyle was banned from coming on the show, which talk about shooting yourself in the foot. Kyle is always one of our top rated guests. And now he's banned from coming on. And you think that this is helping you? It's silly. Right. And even on our way out the door, we recorded a goodbye video for the audience. It was originally supposed to premiere on YouTube, which, as and your audience probably knows, usually leads you to get more attention, more eyeballs on it. We had a certain title set that we wanted for the video. This is our last chance to say goodbye to our audience and tell them where they can find us moving forward. Very important to us. The headline has changed. Then it's up for a while. Then they take it down. Then they take the comments down. Then they put it back up. Now it's completely gone from the channel. And number one, it feels really bad to be sort of their attempt to knife us and undermine us on our way out. But more to the point, it's not even a smart move on their part. Like, the audience noticed all of that, of course. And so again, it's this really silly, outdated legacy thinking that put the handcuffs on us in a lot of ways in terms of, you know, the type of programming we could do and the flexibility and the type of guests we could have on and the conversations and the length of those conversations and all of those things. So we're just excited to have total control, total freedom, put our fate completely in the hands of the audience and no one else. And that feels so amazing. I mean, you know how it feels. It feels absolutely amazing. I really can't compare it to anything else.
And can you kind of talk about, you know, how you two were feeling? Because obviously your compatriots, Kyle, myself, you know,
Yeah.
Jim, we're kind of on a different algorithm, so to speak. Obviously, I mean, The Hill, I mean, you guys did amazing work, but YouTube obviously pumps more legacy, you know, approved channels in feed. So was that in your mind at all, that like, you know, look at what they're doing to people who share our values, things like this. And, you know, we're kind of benefiting from The Hill, but, you know, this is wrong. This kind of this information war against independent outlets.
Oh, 100%. I mean, it's like, it's not a level playing field. And so, you know, obviously I think our content was very strong. People responded to it and whatever, but like, you're doing amazing content. Kyle's doing great content. Jimmy, like, there's a lot of other great content out there that's just being completely blocked and suppressed, and the subscriber numbers completely suppressed. Just not, the content's not being served to new audiences so that new people can find it and build on those subscriber numbers and build. That certainly appears to be what they're doing. And so, yeah, on the one hand, you look at that and you feel kind of bad because you're like, this isn't fair that, you know, I can do a video. Kyle has a very similar number of subs on his channel. He can do a similar topic, similar video, similar headline to a similar audience and get so many fewer views, so much less traction. Wildly unfair. And it really, though, informed how we set up breaking points, because we can't depend on like YouTube or, you know, YouTube monetization or the YouTube algorithm to build any sort of sustainable business, let alone one of the things we want to bring from rising into breaking points is those sort of high level TV production values, because it's one of the core offerings of the model is like, you can look at it and it feels mainstream, even though the content is wildly not mainstream. And so to be able to do that and depend on the whims of YouTube and their algorithm, it's just not possible. So that's really why we leaned into the subscriber model, so that you have that base there, and no matter what YouTube does, they can still screw you in terms of just people being able to see your content, but they won't at least be able to totally destroy the business and make us unable to operate whatsoever.
You ran as a candidate. You remember the Obama years. Then you remember how the Democratic Party, despite losing to a car salesman, moved right and created the Russian boogeyman. I kind of see the same thing happening now, but just in like the Marjorie Taylor Greene and kind of like this boogeyman politics to kind of paper over the fact that Biden has pretty much abandoned the scarce promises he made during the campaign.
Right.
$15 minimum wage, public option. You know, he wants to give police more money, $2,000 checks, you know, many other things. I don't know. That doesn't seem like good strategy to me, coming for midterms and then 2024, basically focusing on Marjorie Taylor Greene, continuing to talk about January 6th, which was heinous. But like, yeah, I'm for a commission, but at a certain point, we don't need to cover that 24/7. What do you think in terms of the Democratic Party seems to be basically doing exactly what it did after they lost to Trump, in terms of just focusing on how terrible the Republicans are?
Oh, absolutely, because it lets them off the hook, right? And I would say and what's really insidious and what I really object to is the focus of the hatred isn't just on the Trumps or Marjorie Taylor Greenes of the world. It's really, they're very invested in, and I think the Republican Party is invested in this narrative going the other direction. And like, those in that entire set of people are awful and evil, and they're going to destroy you, your community, your way of life, the country, et cetera, et cetera. And so you got to show up and vote for us, because even if we're not even capable of like passing some infrastructure in a reasonable time frame, we're better than they're going to destroy the country. So yeah, it's always the politics of fear rather than building any sort of an affirmative case ultimately. And, it barely worked for them in 2020, which is pathetic given that Trump oversaw hundreds of thousands of deaths, the most disgraceful set of lies and propaganda, and just a horrific approach to coronavirus. And they still barely beat him. And now here we are. It's June, and they're saying it's too soon. It's too quick on the timetable for us to be able to get something done by September. So we're going to have to move into the next fiscal year to even try to get infrastructure, which is the most basic promise of all time, let alone, as you said, public option fallen off the table, PRO Act fallen off the table, HR 1 fallen off the table, $15 minimum wage fallen off the table. No one's even talking about it. Even the things that Biden claimed to want to do, like expanding the child tax credit and free universal pre-K, those things are also, not even being sort of like discussed or planned for right now. So anyone who wants to say he's like exceeded expectations or that he's like FDR, I mean, this is absurd. As you said, he's not even meeting the basic promises that he made on the campaign trail, which already were to the furthest right of the Democratic primary field.
And, what's kind of, you and Sagar a lot of times talk about political trends. To me, I see a political trend. You got a few weeks till an eviction time bomb, and nobody's talking. Yes. Nobody's talking about it. In the Bronx, there's like 50,000 eviction notices already, and they're just chomping at the bit for the green light. A lot of states, honestly, and cities have just blown it off. I've been contacted by viewers who say motels are filling up, all of this. Wow. So to me, with the pandemic moving to the better direction, I think, I don't know if it would be like an Occupy Wall Street kind of thing, but I think you're going to see, as things get safer, a real protest movement in this country because more and more people are going to have nothing to lose.
It's certainly possible. And the entire housing market from top to bottom is total immoral insanity. You have, as you were just describing, this pending eviction crisis, and it's tens of millions of Americans who are behind on their rent. There was a congressional, in the relief bill, there were funds provided to help get people current on their rent. Cities and states are struggling to be able to get any of that money out the door because, it's typical like neoliberal bureaucracy, technocratic state stuff where you have to have a million magical documents to prove that your poverty stems directly and your struggles stem directly from the pandemic. So they're not able to distribute the funds. You've got landlords chomping at the bit. And, some of the smaller time, like mom and pop landlords, they're also, in danger of losing their properties, which means these big corporate landlords can come in and suck up all the rental properties. You also have permanent capital represents 1/5 of the market for single family homes. So they're also buying up, in some cases, literally entire communities across the country to become America's landlord. That's helping to fuel this insane price skyrocketing cost of housing. So if you're the young couple starting out trying to like get your toehold on the American dream, forget about it. The prices are so insane that you can't hope to touch anything, and not just in major metros, but in small towns and small cities across the country. These things all have massive ramifications that build on each other. So that's one thing that I've been really focused on and looking a lot at. And you're absolutely right. That deadline that's coming right at us in just a couple of weeks, and there's scarcely any coverage or concern or talk about that, is insane. It's a massive, massive blind spot.
And lastly, obviously, your audience is not just progressives, but a lot of progressives come to you. And I think a lot of progressives right now are kind of out in the wilderness because the people that they donated to, volunteered for, are kind of hibernating. I don't know. I see AOC and the rest of them tweeting Bernie's still sending out emails to sign his petition. But there's, essentially no strategy that I could see among the Progressive Caucus. Pramila Jayapal, they're writing Biden a letter to ask kindly, can you lower the Medicare age to 60? What do you make of this? Because it just seems to me these are incredibly smart people, at least before they got into office, incredibly tenacious people, AOC, Rashida Tlaib, but it just seems like politically, I don't know, maybe they've been seduced by like the long game mentality that you have to work the wheels and try to get your partners over to your type of thinking, rather than realizing, no, they're corrupt. We can't do that.
They're definitely falling victim to the sort of like player in the game mentality by this Washington wisdom that says the way to really get things done, the way to really affect change is to play by the rules and play nice. And of course, the right-wing Democrats don't do that. They're happy to withhold their vote in order to get the salt tax cap lifted. It's a no salt, no dice, which is just a giveaway to largely, wealthy and affluent people. Or on the corporate tax rate, they're more than willing to draw a hard line there, but you don't see a similar willingness on the left side. And, to be fair, and I think this is accurate, the fact that the left actually has principles is basically weaponized against them. So, it's much easier to come to Bernie and say, this relief bill has got to pass. It's got a lot of really good stuff in it. People really need this help. And if you stand in the way, you are going to deny these $1,400 checks and all this relief that people need right now in order to get $15 minimum wage. And the right wing doesn't have any compunction about that. They don't care. They don't have any principles. So it's easier for them. They don't have that, it's easier for them to sleep at night if they're the ones that are kind of blocking the path for whatever bill to pass. But ultimately, you got to draw some hard lines in the sand, and especially on issues that are so needed and so popular, like $15 minimum wage or lowering the Medicare age. It's deeply frustrating. I think maybe the thing that was the most outrageous or the most blatantly frustrating to me was recently when this bill went through increasing the funding for the Capitol Police by, I think it was $1.8 billion or something like that. And AOC and I don't want to get it wrong, who the other couple of members of the squad were, that changed their votes from no to present to give Nancy Pelosi the margin that she needed to fund the police. That's literally what we're talking about. To fund the police to the tune of $1.8 billion is just sad, because it felt like they would have been happy to launch a protest vote if it was meaningless, but when they actually had the power to take a meaningful stand, immediately backed off. That was very revealing and very disappointing ultimately.
And the thing that I find frustrating is we keep getting the messaging, just keep organizing. But we did organize. A lot of people organized to get this level of progressives, credit to the Justice Democrats for getting them in there. So,
yeah.
Sure, it'd be great to have more progressives in the House, but you already have the numbers now to essentially shut down Biden's agenda and Pelosi's agenda on, benefit of the doubt, your Bernie example. Okay, if you wanted to, give in for COVID relief, then on the flip side, you could say, yeah, we'll talk about infrastructure as soon as the 15 minimum wage and things like that. So it just seems like they're yes on having principles and that being weaponized, but then not knowing or not being willing to fight on the next battle.
Well, and there's all this, I think the left has been marginalized and sneered at for so long that when Ron Klain retweets some lefty, there's such a oh my God, they're we're actually in the room. They're actually listening to us. I think there's a lot of sort of, that strategy has, I don't know exactly why, but that strategy has seemed to work really well to get people to feel oh no, these actually listening to progressives, and this is actually really a progressive administration, even though just looking at the facts, and forget about even putting economics aside. Biden on criminal justice has been terrible. He's been very consistent with his record, frankly, of how he's operated throughout his career. So on most things across the board, it'd be very hard to paint this as some, win for progressives in the administration. But the fact that there's an attempt by top level White House officials to not actively sneer at progressives seems to be enough for for a lot of folks for whatever reason. So I don't like to be cynical though. Like I don't want people to feel like, okay, well, what are we organized and this, and we got these people in and it doesn't work. And, what is the path to change? And so if I could say two things, I mean, number one, like you do have to keep at it. Nina Turner, I think, is very, very strong and morally clear individual who, if she got elected to Congress, I think could provide a lot of leadership and potentially help coalesce more of an effective strategy. So there are specific examples where it's like, you got to keep trying and get that critical mass. And then as you probably know, I put a lot of faith and a lot of hope in the labor movement in terms of moving the country forward, having actual solidarity, having the troops on the ground, the boots on the ground to be able to really put pressure on these politicians to do something good that's going to benefit all working class people. So that's the other area that I think we really need to focus on. If I was going to put pressure on the Biden administration, if I could only pick one thing, and it's very hard to pick one because there's so many crises unfolding before us as we speak, but the PRO Act is so vital to, I think, the future possibility of any sort of like left movement or, certainly economic populist movement. So I think that's got to be a top priority for us on the left.
And you want to know how important? I'm literally after this going to Staten Island's Amazon warehouse because they've built a fence outside of it to stop union activity.
It's awesome that you're going, though. You do an incredible job with these stories that people aren't paying enough attention to.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. Everybody should check out Breaking Points, which is debuting
Monday. Yeah, go to our YouTube channel. And if you want to become a premium member, go to KrystalAndSagar.com.
I look forward to it. I was watching you guys every day and glad to have you. And we'll keep in touch.